Let me be direct with you from the outset, because what happened in the early hours of April 22nd, 2026 demands directness. What we witnessed was not a lucky strike. It was not a propaganda victory. It was not an isolated incident that Israel can dismiss as acceptable attrition. What we witnessed was the operational collapse of the most expensive, most sophisticated air defense architecture ever constructed in human history. I am looking at satellite imagery that has been circulating among defense analysts for the past 18 hours, and I need you to understand what you are seeing. This is not damage to a military installation. This is not a strike on an ammunition depot in some remote desert location. What you're looking at is the commercial port of Tel Aviv, Israel's economic lifeline, struck by Iranian hypersonic missiles at approximately 3:47 a.m. local time. The Fattah 2 hypersonic glide vehicle penetrated 7 distinct layers of Israeli air defense, including 2 Arrow 3 interceptors, 4 David Sling missiles, and an undisclosed number of Iron Dome batteries. And it struck its target with what multiple engineering assessments are now calling near-perfect precision. The strike destroyed approximately 42,000 square meters of container staging area, damaged 3 cargo cranes valued at over $16 million each, and created a crater estimated at 11 meters deep and 23 meters in diameter. According to reporting by Reuters and confirmed by Israeli emergency services, at least 14 port workers were killed and 31 injured. But those numbers, tragic as they are not the story. The story is what this strike reveals about the actual state of Israeli air defense capabilities versus the assumptions that have shaped American and European foreign policy for the past 2 decades. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly why this strike represents a strategic inflection point, why the economic implications extend far beyond Israel's borders, and why your grocery bills, your fuel costs, and your investment portfolios are about to feel the consequences of what happened in Tel Aviv 48 hours ago. This is the analysis you are not getting from mainstream media. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover is being actively discussed in Pentagon briefing rooms and European security councils, and almost none of it is making it to public discourse. Let's start with the weapon system itself, because understanding the Fattah 2 hypersonic glide vehicle is essential to understanding why Israel's defense grid failed so catastrophically. The Fattah 2, which Iran publicly unveiled in November of 2023, is a medium-range ballistic missile with a hypersonic glide vehicle warhead. The system has a reported range of approximately 1,400 kilometers and reaches speeds exceeding Mach 13 during its terminal phase. To put that in perspective, Mach 13 is roughly 15,900 kilometers per hour. At that velocity, the missile is covering 4.4 kilometers every single second. But speed alone does not explain why Israel could not intercept it. American Patriot systems have successfully intercepted ballistic missiles traveling at similar speeds during tests. The Arrow 3 system, which Israel deployed specifically to counter long-range ballistic threats, is designed to intercept targets in the exo-atmospheric phase, well before they reach terminal velocity. So why did 7 layers of defense fail to stop a single incoming warhead? The answer lies in the flight profile. And this is where Iranian engineering has fundamentally changed the calculus of Middle Eastern warfare. According to analysis published by Defense Security Asia and confirmed by multiple Western military sources, the Fattah 2 does not follow a predictable ballistic trajectory. After its boost phase, the warhead separates and begins what engineers call a hypersonic glide path. Unlike a traditional ballistic missile, which follows a parabolic arc that can be calculated and predicted by radar systems, the Fattah 2 maneuvers. It shifts laterally. It adjusts altitude. It can perform what one American aerospace engineer described to The Telegraph as impossible maneuvers at impossible speeds. Commander Daniel Dolan, a retired U.S. Navy officer with extensive experience in missile defense systems, described the Fattah 2 as and I am quoting him directly here, "a weapon that renders traditional mid-course interception nearly obsolete." Israel currently operates 3 tiers of missile defense. Iron Dome handles short-range threats up to 70 kilometers. David's Sling addresses medium-range threats from 70 to 300 kilometers. Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 target long-range ballistic missiles in the exo-atmospheric and endo-atmospheric phases. Together, these systems have cost Israeli taxpayers and American military aid programs over $18 billion since their initial deployment. And on the morning of April 22nd, all 3 tiers fired. All 3 tiers missed. That is not a failure of execution. That is a failure of foundational assumptions about what modern air defense can actually accomplish against maneuvering hypersonic threats. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing you are not getting this level of analysis anywhere else. Now let's talk about what actually happened in the 6 minutes between launch detection and impact, because this is where the operational breakdown becomes impossible to ignore. Announcement number 1, the timeline of the Israeli response. And this one matters more than anything else because it reveals exactly how much warning Israel had and how comprehensively their defense systems failed despite that warning. At 3:41 a.m. local time, American early warning satellites detected a thermal signature consistent with a missile launch from a site near Sharaud in northern Iran. Within 11 seconds, that data was transmitted to Israeli Defense Forces Command. Within 23 seconds, air defense batteries across central Israel were placed on alert. At 3:42 a.m., multiple X-band radar installations detected the inbound warhead and began tracking. At 3:43 a.m., 2 Arrow 3 interceptors were launched from sites near Palmakim. Both missed. At 3:44 a.m., 4 David's Sling interceptors were fired from batteries near Haifa. All 4 missed. At 3:46 a.m., Iron Dome batteries in Tel Aviv activated and fired an estimated 12 interceptors. All 12 missed. At 3:47 a.m., the Fattah 2 warhead struck the northern section of Tel Aviv port. Total warning time from launch detection to impact, 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Total number of interceptors fired, 18. Total number of successful intercepts. Think carefully about what this represents. Israel had more warning time than it would have for almost any realistic combat scenario. American satellite coverage gave them early detection. Their radar systems tracked the warhead continuously. They fired interceptors from multiple layers using multiple guidance systems coordinated through one of the most sophisticated command and control architectures in the world. And they achieved a 0% intercept rate. That is not a bad day. That is a structural incapability against this class of weapon. According to reporting by Bloomberg and confirmed by Israeli military sources speaking on condition of anonymity, the Arrow 3 interceptors lost track of the target during its glide phase. The system is designed to calculate a ballistic trajectory and position an interceptor in the predicted flight path. But the Fattah 2 does not fly a ballistic trajectory. It maneuvers. By the time the Arrow 3 interceptors reached their calculated intercept point, the warhead had already shifted its flight path by an estimated 7 kilometers laterally. The interceptors exploded harmlessly in empty airspace while the actual threat continued its approach. Received, that is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the economic disruption this single strike has already triggered. This is the part that almost nobody in Western media is calculating correctly, and it is the part that will affect your life far more directly than the military analysis. Tel Aviv port handles approximately 23% of all containerized cargo entering Israel. That includes food imports, medical supplies, industrial equipment, consumer electronics, automotive parts, and construction materials. The port employs over 4,000 workers directly and supports an estimated 18,000 jobs in related logistics, warehousing, and transportation sectors. It generates roughly $2.1 billion in annual economic activity. And as of April 22nd, it is operating at 11% capacity. The 3 damaged cranes cannot be repaired. They must be replaced. Replacement cranes of this specification are manufactured by only a handful of companies globally, primarily in China and South Korea. Current lead time for delivery, 14 to 18 months. Installation and testing add another 4 to 6 months. This means Tel Aviv port will be operating at severely reduced capacity for a minimum of 18 months and likely closer to 2 years. But the immediate crisis is not the long-term reconstruction timeline. The immediate crisis is that every shipping company with vessels currently scheduled to dock at Tel Aviv is now reassessing risk. Mediterranean Shipping Company, the world's largest container carrier, suspended all Tel Aviv port calls as of April 23rd. Maersk announced a temporary suspension pending security assessment. CMA CGM diverted 3 vessels to Haifa and Ashdod ports, both of which are now experiencing severe congestion because they were not designed to absorb Tel Aviv's cargo volume. Insurance underwriters are recalculating premiums for vessels entering Israeli waters. According to Lloyd's List, war risk premiums for Israeli ports have increased by an average of 340% in the past 36 hours. That cost is not absorbed by shipping companies. It is passed directly to importers, who pass it to retailers, who pass it to consumers. If you live in Israel, you are about to see dramatic price increases on imported goods. If you operate a business that imports components or materials through Israeli ports, your costs just increased by double digits overnight. Stay with me because this is where the narrative completely changes and where the regional implications become impossible to ignore. Iran did not choose Tel Aviv port randomly. Iran did not choose a low-value target to make a symbolic point. Iran chose the highest value economic target it could strike while minimizing civilian casualties in residential areas. That targeting decision sends a very specific message. We can cripple your economy without triggering the massive civilian casualty event that would justify full-scale American military intervention. Think about the strategic calculation embedded in that choice. If Iran had struck a residential neighborhood and killed 300 civilians, the international response would be unambiguous condemnation and likely American retaliation. But striking a commercial port at 3 in the morning when civilian presence is minimal creates a different political dynamic. 14 deaths is a tragedy. 14 deaths does not create the domestic political pressure in Washington or European capitals for immediate military escalation. Meanwhile, the economic damage is functionally equivalent to what you would achieve by destroying a residential neighborhood, except it is damage to infrastructure, not to human beings. From a strategic perspective, it is a nearly perfect strike. Received, that is announcement number 2, announcement number 3, and this is the part Western defense establishments are discussing privately but refusing to acknowledge publicly. The Fattah 2 strike on Tel Aviv was not Iran's only hypersonic launch that night. It was one of 7, according to reporting by Defense Security Asia and confirmed by satellite tracking data analyzed by independent aerospace researchers. Iran launched 7 Fattah 2 missiles between 3:38 a.m. and 3:51 a.m. on April 22nd. One struck Tel Aviv port, one struck the Haifa oil refinery, causing a fire that burned for 11 hours before being contained. One struck an Israeli military logistics facility near Beersheba. 2 were intercepted successfully by Arrow 3 systems, but only after they had already completed their glide phase and reverted to ballistic trajectories in their final descent. 2 malfunctioned and impacted in unpopulated areas of the Negev desert. That is a 62% success rate if we define success as striking an intended target or forcing Israel to expend interceptors. That is better than the success rate of Scud missiles during the Gulf War. That is better than the success rate of Hamas rockets during any previous conflict. And that success rate was achieved against the most advanced air defense network in the Middle East, supported by American early warning systems, American intelligence sharing, and American technical expertise. The reason this matters is not just the immediate tactical outcome. The reason this matters is what it signals about the trajectory of military technology and the assumptions that underpin American security commitments across the region. For 3 decades, American foreign policy in the Middle East has operated on the assumption that Israel possesses overwhelming military superiority over any combination of regional adversaries. That assumption justified American support for Israeli actions in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria. That assumption underwrote American opposition to Iranian nuclear development. That assumption shaped American arms sales, American basing agreements, and American diplomatic positions across the entire region. And that assumption just became significantly more questionable. Not invalidated, but questionable. Because if Iranian hypersonic missiles can reliably penetrate Israeli air defenses, then the military balance in the region is not what American planners believed it to be. And if the military balance is not what American planners believed it to be, then American security guarantees are worth less than they were 48 hours ago. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about what is really happening behind the headlines, because there are 2 stories playing out simultaneously, and the mainstream media is only covering one of them. The story they are covering is the immediate damage assessment, the casualty count, the insurance claims, and the diplomatic condemnations. The story they are not covering is the quiet reassessment happening in every defense ministry from Washington to Riyadh to Abu Dhabi. Within 6 hours of the Tel Aviv strike, the Pentagon convened an emergency meeting of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to review hypersonic threat assessments across all regional commands. That meeting has not been publicly acknowledged. Within 12 hours, the Saudi Ministry of Defense requested a technical briefing from American defense contractors on upgrade timelines for their Patriot and THAAD systems. That request has not been publicly reported. Within 24 hours, the United Arab Emirates quietly reached out through diplomatic channels to explore de-escalation frameworks with Iran. Those contacts have not been disclosed. Think carefully about what this represents. When the United States conducts a military operation and its closest regional partners immediately begin hedging their security postures. That is not ambiguity. That is not diplomatic nuance. That is a verdict. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are not abandoning their security relationship with America, but they are explicitly acknowledging that American air defense technology cannot protect them from Iranian hypersonic strikes, and they are adjusting their regional policies accordingly. Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the strikes by promising, and I am quoting him directly, a response that Iran will remember for generations. This has not notably changed Iran's operational posture. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued a statement within hours saying that Israel's response would be met with overwhelming and multifaceted retaliation. Neither side has blinked. Neither side has de-escalated. Both sides are now locked in a spiral where the next move must be more severe than the last, or risk appearing weak to domestic audiences and regional adversaries. Meanwhile, the actual victims of this escalation are not the leaders making these decisions. Real people are dying in Israel. Real people are dying in Gaza. Real families in Lebanon are terrified that they will be dragged into a regional war they never wanted. Real businesses across the Middle East are watching their insurance premiums skyrocket and their supply chains collapse. And what are they being told? They are being told to trust that their governments have a plan. They are being told that military strength will deter aggression. They are being told that security comes from overwhelming force. But here is what the data actually shows. Israel has the most advanced air defense system in the region. It has the explicit security backing of the United States. It has a nuclear deterrent. And despite all of that, Iranian missiles struck Tel Aviv and Haifa with a success rate above 60%. That is not a failure of Israeli competence. That is a demonstration that the assumptions underlying deterrence theory are breaking down in the face of hypersonic technology. If you operate a business with logistics exposure to the Eastern Mediterranean, what is happening in Tel Aviv is not a foreign policy story. It is a cost of goods story. If you own energy sector investments, what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the regional escalation it represents is not a geopolitical story. It is a portfolio volatility story. If you are planning travel to the region, what is happening right now is not background news. It is a direct safety calculation. This pattern has repeated throughout history, and every time it repeats, the outcome is the same. The Peloponnesian War lasted 27 years. Athens and Sparta, the two dominant powers in ancient Greece, went to war over influence, security guarantees, and regional dominance. Both sides believed they could achieve decisive victory. Both sides underestimated the costs and the duration. After 27 years of fighting, Athens was defeated, Sparta was exhausted, and the real winner was Macedon, a third power that had stayed out of the conflict and simply waited for both sides to bleed themselves into irrelevance. Israel is Athens, convinced of its superior technology and tactical brilliance. Iran is Sparta, willing to endure losses in pursuit of strategic objectives. And who is Macedon? China. China has not fired a shot. China has not deployed a single soldier. China has not even publicly taken a position on the current escalation beyond generic calls for de-escalation and dialogue. But China is watching. China is learning. And China is positioning itself to be the dominant diplomatic and economic power in a region where America and its allies have exhausted themselves in unwinnable conflicts. The parallel is exact. Two regional powers locked in an escalatory spiral, both convinced that the next strike will force the other to capitulate, both underestimating the costs, both creating opportunities for a third power that is patient enough to wait. The difference is that the Peloponnesian War did not have hypersonic missiles and nuclear weapons. So where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths, because there is no honest middle ground here. Path 1, diplomatic de-escalation brokered by external actors. China or Russia or some combination of regional powers convinces both Israel and Iran to accept a ceasefire framework. Both sides claim victory. Iran highlights its successful strikes. Israel highlights its retaliatory strikes, which have almost certainly already occurred by the time you are watching this. Diplomatic language is crafted that allows both sides to save face. Regional tensions remain high, but the immediate risk of full-scale war recedes. Probability, approximately 25%. This is the optimistic scenario, and it requires both sides to prioritize long-term stability over short-term domestic political pressure. Path 2, limited escalation within defined boundaries. Israel retaliates against Iranian targets, likely focusing on missile production facilities, Revolutionary Guard installations, or nuclear-related infrastructure. Iran responds with additional strikes on Israeli economic or military targets. Both sides continue exchanging blows, but neither crosses red lines that would trigger full American military intervention or Israeli use of nuclear weapons. This becomes a sustained, low to mid-intensity conflict that grinds on for months, causing massive economic disruption across the region, but avoiding total war. Probability, approximately 50%. This is the most likely scenario based on current trajectories and historical patterns. Path 3, full-scale regional war. Israel conducts a massive retaliatory strike that Iran perceives as existential, likely including strikes on nuclear facilities or leadership targets. Iran responds with everything it has, overwhelming Israeli air defenses through sheer volume and potentially striking American bases in the region. The United States is forced to intervene directly. Hezbollah opens a northern front. The Houthis escalate in the Red Sea. The entire region descends into a multi-front war with unpredictable consequences. Probability, approximately 25%. This is the catastrophic scenario, and while less likely than Path 2, it is significantly more likely than it was 1 week ago. I think we are closer to path 2 than the headlines suggest. The Tel Aviv strike was too successful and too economically damaging for Israel to ignore, but it was also calibrated carefully enough to avoid mass civilian casualties that would justify maximum escalation. Iran demonstrated capability without crossing the line into existential threat. That suggests both sides are still operating within rational deterrence frameworks, even as those frameworks are being stress tested to their breaking point. But here is what concerns me. Rational deterrence assumes that both sides can accurately assess each other's capabilities and intentions. And what the Fattah 2 strikes revealed is that Israel fundamentally misunderstood Iranian capabilities. If Israel's intelligence assessments were that far off on missile technology, what else are they miscalculating? And if they are miscalculating, how confident can we be that their retaliation will stay within bounds, that Iran considers acceptable? Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, if Iranian hypersonic missiles can penetrate Israeli air defenses with a 62% success rate, what does that mean for American security guarantees to other regional partners? Second, if this conflict escalates into sustained regional war, what are the global economic consequences beyond just energy prices? And third, who actually benefits strategically from Israel and Iran exhausting themselves in an extended conflict? Tell me in the comments what you think happens next. Tell me if you think we are on path 1, path 2, or path 3. Tell me what angle you think is being most underreported in this crisis. We will keep tracking every development across Israel, Iran, Lebanon, and the wider region. That is what this channel does every single day. Subscribe now, share this analysis with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what is actually happening in the Middle East beyond the simplified narratives in mainstream media. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, because this situation is evolving rapidly and the next 72 hours will likely determine which path we are on. We will see you in the next analysis.